So I'm the director of sales and customer success at Referral Rock. Referral Rock is a marketing software that helps companies run and scale referral programs. So think like Uber, Dropbox, Airbnb, a lot of their growth came through referral marketing. So what we do is we work with marketers across many different industries. We've noticed that they're super overwhelmed with all the different tools and projects that they work on. So we really focus on building a automated solution that's going to integrate with their existing systems and marketing channels, so that it largely runs in the background and they're focusing on kind of their day-to-day job.
Yeah. How old is the company roughly?
We're about 4 years old.
And how many people do you have on board?
14.
14, yeah. So one of the first thing I noticed, Mica, is, the talking about your title being customer success and sales. Now, of course, there is a very close relationship between the two. How do you actually see, both roles? Do they actually have their own sort of like challenges, or for you, it's like one big thing?
They're two distinct teams, but there's some pretty core overlap, meaning the customer. So it's super nice kind of being able to have a foot in both camps, because you can really like guide that customer experience. You can make sure that there's a super smooth transition between someone's going through the sales process and then when they're actually a customer and are going sort of onboarding and getting started with Referral Rock. So I really like the alignment and kind of the focus on the customer, but there's definitely sort of challenges with running sort of two teams at once that do have different needs and different personalities.
Yeah, do you want to take us through some of those challenges maybe, and some maybe tips for the listeners if they are thinking about doing the same thing? Or would you recommend doing the same thing for a start?
Yeah, so I definitely would. I mean, we are an inside or an inbound sales team. So sort of marketing is driving us leads, and then sort of we take over ownership of that customer journey from sort of that initial touch point with sales. Usually that's in the form of a demo, and then kind of guiding that customer throughout their journey. Both in sales and customer success is very consultative. So like we're really just trying to help the customer. So in that regards, it's really great to get alignment with that. It's really great to have a kind of clear picture of what challenges those customers are facing, the conversations that sales having, and then how that transitions to CS, so that you can kind of pick up that learning and you don't have to necessarily like start from the ground zero. It also is great for alignment. So you're able to kind of align sales projects with customer success projects all around that customer journey. In terms of the challenge I think that the biggest thing is the teams run somewhat independently, but I'm sort of the overlap. And then we kind of have some office hours and just discussions around like, CS giving feedback to sales, based on the customers that have signed up so that they can, alter their process. Challenges for me has been, there's a lot to do in both teams. So like making sure like I'm correctly prioritizing tasks and just sort of handling, the different challenges that we see there. I mean, some of the sort of key takeaways and lessons learned from sort of starting this is you need to hire great people. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, but we've been able to restructure the team so that even though we're still relatively small, there's a couple levels. So we have our main customer success manager, our main sort of implementation chat support, 2 team members, and then above them there is a CS manager, and she's largely managing the day-to-day and sort of is overseeing CS, and so or the day-to-day operations rather. So it's been great for her to kind of take on that ownership and really run with it, and where I'm at that point can be more strategic. And then we're doing the same things on sales. So we have 2 main sales guys. One is a little more junior, so he's kind of the sales consultant role, and then we have a sales manager role, which has been a great mentor for him. I'm more actively involved in sales because that's more where my background is, but it is nice to pass on some of that day-to-day management to kind of those core sort of managers within their own sales and CS teams. Outside of that, we're also a remote team, so it's like super important to have systems and processes in place so that kind of everything is following a very similar structure in terms of how you're managing tasks, what those priorities are. We document everything, so that was a big change for us. Probably about a year ago, we started an internal wiki, and now we have all of our processes document. We have different playbooks for different things. We're probably a few years ahead of sort of a similar company that is based out of like a single location. But that's because we've had to be. We've had sort of our our learnings and our challenges of not being on the same page and not having systems to kind of manage like what our priorities are today.
Yeah, so if I take that right, you have a remote team, and some of the challenges obviously comes in the form of communication. And one of the way to get around that is to have, capture all the internal understanding or implicit knowledge, and then put it on a wiki. That's correct.
Yep. So that's been something that's been super valuable to us. The other sort of thing around communication that's been very valuable to us is previously we use Slack and everything was on Slack. And so like our next phase was like, okay, we'll have different Slack channels. And that was better, but then that kind of got a bit out of control with like multiple people kind of chatting in at different times around different projects. And so we've since transitioned to we use Asana for our project management tool, but like we're like sort of active power users of Asana now. We have different Kanban boards for sort of different phases of how a project kind of moves through. And then like each task, each project is its own card. And then within that, like all communication that needs to happen around that particular task is all done on the card. And we've taken that communication outside of Slack and putting it in the Asana card so that it's very easy to kind of look at the history, see what's going back and forth. We started to use a lot more use of like screenshots and videos, sort of handling those remote communication channels that where like if you were in person, it'd be a lot easier just to point to someone. So making sure that translate across like the remote team.
So you're still using Slack for internal communication, but when it needs to be captured and things needs to be moved and keeping track of things, then it goes into Asana. That's fair?
Yeah, and Slack is more for like sort of real-time conversations around something that we can maybe like solve quickly, or if there's sort of general questions. Ideally, that thing gets into like an internal wiki page or is documented on the knowledge base if it's product focused. But anything that's related to a project should live in our Asana task and have basically have comments there so that it's well documented so people can kind of get the history of the community of the conversation.
And that applies to customer success and sales?
It applies across the entire team, but in sort of the two teams I oversee, yes, both sales and customer success. Sales is not as project heavy, so oftentimes we use our CRM for a lot of the communication around the deals and the contacts and the opportunities, and then we review those on a weekly basis. So the sales conversations are usually more around like, hey, I need help. Can you like sort of quick questions? But anything project focused would live in our project management tool.
Got it. Can you give us some examples so we understand what type of project you guys have in terms of customer success?
Yeah, so the big one that we've been kind of working on now is so when someone signs up, they will get a dedicated customer success manager, and that's been a big change for us. I mean, it's a few years old, but that was super important to help people kind of learn the product and walk them through. And what we've seen is that, hey, if you get set up from the beginning and you do things correctly, you're going to stay with us for a long time. It's the people that don't get set up correctly that kind of like churn. Yeah. So first thing we did was like, all right, let's have dedicated customer success managers for all of our clients. In the beginning, that was sort of me doing it and largely like, hey, I would just onboard them. I would document some of it, but I kind of knew it. So I was just like, all right, let's get started. And then as we built out that team, we started to bring, new people on, and we can talk about onboarding. I think there's some good lessons learned there. But in terms of like the project base, one of our recent projects was we're redesigning our kickoff and onboarding slide deck. So one of the things that we learned is while our product is meant to be easy to use, it can do a lot, and we have different challenges around how do we tell the customer exactly what they need to know and not too much, and then how do we kind of phase it out so that they're learning in sort of manageable increments so that they will be successful. And so we've redone our project was we redid our sort of kickoff and onboarding slides to be like, okay, let's just redesign this whole process. What does that look like? What is the kind of the customer journey when they're coming to us, and what do they need to know today, like day one, day two, and day three?
And the slides are
Um,
internal or external, like for the customer as well, or it's just internally for guiding how to onboard?
um, so they are external. So we'll get
External.
on like that our first kickoff call with them, and we'll be like, you know, this is our playbook. This is sort of day one, day two, day three. This is what you're going to learn. This is what we're going to walk you through. And it makes it puts it in bite-sized chunks, which has been super valuable instead of trying to overwhelm them with, hey, this is everything we can do. So that project was led by one of our customer success managers, who's actively working with the client. So that's great. He can provide us real kind of time feedback. He can lead that project, but he also has a lot of other things going on. So he was able to manage that within sort of our Asana board so that they could kind of track where that task is, and then all the history there was within the actual card. So his manager and myself could then provide more strategic input and help him guide that process.
Okay, cool. That's a really good example. Was this project to reduce churn specifically?
So one of the biggest things we've noticed, so I think everything is to reduce churn.
To some extent, yeah.
Our main metric for that is speed to launch and sort of speed to like
Nice.
successful launch, because what we've noticed is if you can get up and running with the program, you'll start to generate results and you get more excited, and maybe it's more time, but you're like, okay, great, I can totally see how this works. Help me like further optimize, and you can get buy-in from the rest of the team. The challenge there is how do you get people to launch as quickly as possible? And so everything we do, at least at the moment, that's kind of our North Star, is how can we make people launch faster?
Got it.
So the kickoff stuff, the onboarding stuff is all geared towards making that experience as easy as possible. And then sort of the product tries to complement that with sort of the own sort of self-service and product onboarding as well.
Okay, really cool. So you mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about, or you guys are doing like onboarding slightly differently when you have a new person coming on board. Can you walk us through a bit of that?
Sure. So for us, the onboarding of like new people somewhat starts in like the hiring process. So, we've gotten better at finding the best fits for us. And a big kind of takeaway there is give them like a real life assignment. So for sales, it's like, give us a demo. Let's talk about feedback. Do it again, like sell us something. You're going to be giving demos. That's kind of our main sort of entry point. Like you got to nail the demo. And then, are they coachable? Are they curious? Do they have that customer consultative approach, or are they trying to like hard sell? And so trying to make sure that there's a good fit, and then that they're willing to kind of learn and adapt, because our product can, again, because it can do so much, and because we work with so many different types of companies, it has to be really targeted towards the customer. So, really understanding what they do, what they care about, how their systems, how their sales process works, allows us to create a very personalized demo. So we want people that can do that. And so like starting very early in terms of that sales process and the sales hiring makes that all easier.
How
And then
do you test for coachable? Just a quick one.
I mean, it's hard. I think some of it pulls out around like just the conversations you've had, some of the challenges that they struggle with. What do they care about? Where do they want to go? So you can kind of pull some of that out, and the more like sort of experience, are they going to be kind of a good fit?
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, like the practice demo is key. Like when they give the demo, and you're just, it's a role playing exercise where you're the potential buyer. How do they interact with you? And then immediately after that, you give them feedback, and you kind of review it. And then they do the demo again. And if they improve, and if they sort of implement the feedback that you gave them, even if it's not perfect, is very telling of whether or not they're responsive.
Yeah.
If
So
they
you
don't
actually
listen
test
and
the
they just
coachability itself.
exactly.
Nice, I like that. And regarding demos, and I know we're going to come back to the onboarding, but regarding demos, I've been interviewing someone from Trello and someone from Proposify. And it was very interesting to see their approach was really completely different. Like Proposify actually had like a really good script and narrative about, how do you take someone through the funnel of the demo. And then Trello was more like a total discovery mode. And, because their user base is like so broad, it could, they could do anything. So it was really a lot more about being able to react very quickly to very different inputs. What would you say is the case at your company?
Probably a little bit of a hybrid between the two. So like for us, discovery is critical
Mm-hmm.
because similar to the second company, we work with so many different types of businesses, and it's such like a horizontal field in terms of who could benefit from referral marketing software. So
Right.
we want to make sure that they're getting the best solution that's going to fit with their needs. It's going to integrate with their systems and their sales process, because what we know is if like marketers are so busy and they already have all this like marketing technology, they don't want to do another system. They don't want to force like sales reps to work within another system. They have those tools in place. So we have to our whole thing is like we'll put like word of mouth on autopilot. And the only way we can do that is by understanding exactly their what are their customer touch points, what are the marketing channels that they're doing, what are the systems and sort of sales process that a new referral would come through. And so that's very heavy discovery early on, because then we have to essentially like walk them through how we can take all of that context and how then we can help solve their challenges with our software. So discovery is huge. And then the demo itself, like there's some baseline, I guess discovery is part of the demo, but like actually talking about the software portion of those early demos, you have to take the discovery and apply it, but you can also script a lot of that out because you are showing similar things, but there might be like opportunities for the sales consultant to, add a little bit more context based on what was learned in the discovery process.
Yeah, so you would say there is some categories or some type of categories. So there is a time for the discovery, and then after that, depending on the categories, then there is a sort of like different script or some of the script
A little
merged.
bit,
Okay.
kind of based on some certain criteria. Like you could fall in like one of like a few sort of scripts, but also within the script itself, it's like, these are like the highlights, and then this would be an area where,
Oh, I see.
sort of what was mentioned in discovery is like a good input to personalize it more to the prospect.
And how do you make sure that the discovery phase is not taking too long time? Because usually, the slots for demos are probably back to back, if I'm correct. And therefore, there is a time where there is discovery, but after that, this sort of scripted demo that comes afterwards. So how do you actually ensure that the discovery is not taking the whole call and you haven't time to actually demo the actual thing?
Yeah, well, we've played around with a lot of this. I mean, I think there's you got to do discovery. Like discovery is probably one of the most important thing you can do on
For
the demo.
sure.
If you don't spend enough time on discovery, like you might as well just send them a video. Like
That's
you're
right.
not making it consultative. So you have to do that, and you have to make time for that. Our demos are typically 30 minutes, and our sort of high level guideline is like 10 minutes discovery, 10 minutes like sort of software. There's a couple of slides, and then 10 minutes kind of around like, sort of next steps, any other additional review. The other thing with that is like when you do the demo, you're not teaching them the product. You're showing them like what are the wow moments, what's like really valuable about the product, what's unique, how does these certain elements, how's that going to work for them. And so the goal of that call would be like, hey, this is a great fit. You've answered all my questions. Like, I understand kind of sort of the challenges that you're going to face. I see that this is going to be valuable to me and it's going to fit within my existing context. And then like the next step would be like, hey, let's do like a review call. Are there any other people on your team that need to be involved? Let's walk through like exactly what this is going to look like for you in based on some of that discovery, but you still got to collect that up front. And then you still got to give the demo so that they are excited about the product. I mean, that's what they signed up to see. So you can't just be like, hey, let me just do all discovery and then in the conversation. So it is a balance, but you got to save time for like confirming next steps because it's a 30-minute slot for us. What are the key points you want to get across? What's important to them? And then kind of position of like who else on your team do we need to talk with, and let's walk through what this actually looks like in practice.
Okay, I think I understand now better. Your demo, so it's like 10 minutes, discovery, 10 minutes for the software with slides and not actually demoing the software itself.
No, we demo the
Oh, you do
software. There's
as
just
well.
a
Okay, interesting.
yeah. There's a few slides that we show in the beginning.
Right.
And one of the most important things that it makes sense for us because we do this is just the referral process. And there's a little more to that than you might like first expect. And we want to make sure like, hey, based on all this discovery, this is our understanding how we're going to really build out this automated referral journey for you. So we have a slide that walks them through that. And then we basically transition over to like the software and kind of show what are those like key moments, the things that they'll really care about that gets them excited. And then the review call is more around like advanced questions, technical integrations, who else on the team kind of has those kind of concerns. So we can go deep into the product at that point. But we definitely want to show them the product in that first call because they're signing up for a demo. So they want to get a taste, and they'd get frustrated if you just showed them slides.
Makes sense. Talking about your customer, and I'm sorry for the very long detour to the onboarding, but we're going to come back to that. Can you actually let us know a bit what audience it is? Like, is it like enterprise? Is it SMB? Is it starter? What type of audience do you have?
I mean, one of the things where we can do better at is sort of really like nail our best fit customers. We do have some ideas. One of the sort of the pros about referral marketing is it's really applicable to like so many different businesses and industries. One of the cons is it's very hard to be like, this is what we only do like these types of industries. Right. So again, that's why discovery is so important. So we can kind of help guide them through that journey. But some sort of high level numbers. So, it's mostly around like who our customers are, like their users, their customers. What's that personality type, and is word of mouth important for them? So like any type of B2C business, almost always like a great fit for a referral program, unless there's things that would like, I don't know, prevent them, like lawyers and real estate agents. There's some laws in place.
No one wants to refer that attract that anyway.
Yeah, there you go. So, but beyond that, B2C is great. Company size, you want to have a certain customer base. So like startups can work, but they're a little more challenging. But, really anywhere from like sort of the SMB, not sort of super early to enterprise if it has the right client base. I mean, we don't do well with companies that sell to like the government, but or like sort of large, multi-million-dollar security contracts. But most anything else like would fall under a good fit for us.
Did you identify that some people actually don't work at all for you?
What do you mean? Well, certain customers?
Yeah, exactly. Some customer that there's no point in spending time with them because it's not going to be successful for them on their type of work.
So we try to think about that as like company and team fit. So like there's certain companies that we know work really well, like staffing companies work great, SaaS companies work great, credit unions work really well, like anything online works fantastic. E-commerce works great. And usually those companies have teams that work well, but we also get some companies like take like a lawn care, or we'll take a lawn care company. Like from a company standpoint, that should be a great fit because it's sort of an ongoing service. It's very referable. It's word of mouth driven. So it has, people, there's a need for it, and people are kind of actively looking. So from a company standpoint, great fit. The problem is not all lawn care services have marketing teams. So like the larger
Oh,
ones can
okay.
do really well, but if you don't have someone like internally owning it and it's just coming from like the owner, that's going to be challenging for us because there's not someone that's really driving it.
Got it. Understand. Okay, so let's come back to the onboarding. So you ask them to do the demo, you give them some advice, you ask them to do a second demo in order to figure out, are they coachable? How does that carry on from here?
Yeah, so that's on the sales side. On the CS side, we do something similar. We have
Hmm.
them actually set up a referral program using our software,
Oh,
and
nice.
we help them along the way. So there's an integration piece to that. So that's great. It's like, hey, can you set it up? And again, are you coachable? Because sometimes we have to help them with certain things, but like, are you learning and how do you respond to that type of work? Because that's what they're going to be doing
Hmm.
in their role to help customers get set up. But kind of once we've found someone that we think is going to be a good fit um, and we hire them in the start, we have a fairly intensive 2 week training program, and that lives on like an internal site that we have, and kind of walks them through, you know, everything you need to know to be successful at your job. And a lot of it is self-paced, which is great for sort of efficiency and being like a small company, but it's also uh, along the way, like we'll have like one-on-one check-in. So it's like, let's talk with, whoever your, sales or CS managers, let's talk about what you learned. And then we have, it's either a back and forth conversation. It's like we quiz them, but there's a very structured learning that within those 2 weeks they know what Referral Rock is. They know kind of where we focus on. They know a lot about referral marketing. They know, what they know our product. They know kind of the sales process. They know the customer success process. They've given like some practice demos. They've set up programs. So it's quite comprehensive. And at the end of that time, it's like, okay, great. This is my crash course and kind of everything I need to know. And what works really well about that is it's very efficient because a lot of it is self-paced with like videos and assignments and sort of they do the learning, but there's like the one-on-one sort of check-ins along the way.
And who actually started creating this um, self-paced, self-learning
So it
training
was,
program, should I say?
yeah, so I did a lot of it, but the CEO did a lot of it as well. So the founder CEO, he did a lot on like what is referral marketing and kind of some of like the product structure. And then I kind of took like who our customers are, what does the sales process look like, what does the customer success process look like.
And you use
But
that
that was a
as,
group effort, and
yeah.
we all kind of constantly like iterate and improve. So at the end of anytime someone goes through the training, it's like the last sort of session in that training is, all right, give us feedback now. Now you tell us what we could have done better, and then we like build that into the training.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you actually ask those people who went through the training to actually come back and revisit the training themselves? So, every
Uh,
newcomer actually do it, or it's more like
so we don't,
suggestions?
yeah, we don't ask them to redo the training. We ask them for basically feedback on like whether certain, and we're kind of asking this along the way, but then we have like a whole session dedicated to like, all right, what could we have done better? And then you know, they pick out things, and then more often than not, we're like, great, now go fix it. So there's a lot of that.
Cool. Smart move. Okay, so that means that roughly after 2 weeks, you know if it's a good fit or not for the type of work they should execute. That's roughly true.
After the 2 weeks, we kind of have a good sense of, you know, how quickly they're learning. Like, sort of, are they picking up? We have a good sense of,
Hmm.
are they coachable? Um, at that point, we haven't done too much. Like, they'll listen to calls. They might shadow some calls, whether it's on the sales or the CS side. Um, they haven't done much practice yet,
Hmm.
so we do have a good idea, but it's not like, it's not we're not 100% sure at that point. So kind of following that 2 weeks, it's more like into the deep end. We'll support you, like, well, if it's on the sales, uh, you'll start, throughout that process, you'll shadow some calls, but then you'll lead the calls and we'll shadow them, we'll review them. But largely, at that point, you're up and running. And then same with CS in terms of the kickoff and onboarding calls.
Did you make any big mistakes in hiring in the early days, and anything that we can learn from?
Yeah.
It's kind
Made
of
several.
rhetorical questions, I know.
Um, I mean, a couple of the lessons learned was do the job first. So like one of the big mistakes I'd say is we tried to hire someone for a marketing role that sort of I wasn't doing, and like the main sort of like CEO co-founder wasn't doing either. So we didn't necessarily know what was required of that, and then we were completely off in terms of fit. On the sales CS side, also even though I had done the role, like also made several hiring mistakes in terms of like understanding like who the ideal candidate is. Some of that I think just comes with the territory. Like you're going to make those mistakes anyways. It's sort of hard, even if you can do something yourself. You have a lot more context, and so it's kind of easier to be more adaptable. Mistakes I've learned is like not everyone is going to be a great fit for all roles. So we've had issues where we're like trying to transition someone from like a customer success manager to like a sales consultant, and vice versa, and that there's just certain personality types that sort of make people better at certain types of roles. So that was some issues there, but just in general, just understanding like what the characteristics of that role is, and how someone is going to be successful. That was also before we instituted this assignment. So that the assignment during the hiring process actually made a huge difference. That was a nice lesson learned to kind of make sure we have the right people in place ahead of time.
Can you tell us some of the challenges of hiring remotely?
Yeah, so there's like I love working remotely, but not everyone does. Not all personalities can work remotely. So communication is incredibly important and is a challenge. You have to make sure like the person wants to work remotely. I'm amazed at how many people apply for some of our positions, and we say like, how do you feel about working remotely? And they're like, oh, I would never do that. And we're like, okay, well, we're a remote company. What are you doing? So I think it's important to like have that conversation early. Make sure like, hey, this is going to be a good fit for you. We don't require that everyone's worked remotely before, but if you have and you can talk about some of your experiences doing that, that's that's great for us, because it's like, oh, you've done it, you like it, because a lot of people think it's great, but then they're like, actually, like I hate this.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of sort of those are probably most of like the hiring challenges. Like they got to be like super accountable. Like we have to, communication is huge. Like you're not in the same physical location. We do try to be all roughly like US based, so that there is at least like time overlap. But there's not going to be someone there kind of like sitting over their shoulder monitoring them like day to day. So there's a big trust element to it. As long as you kind of have the systems and processes in place, and you're upfront in the hiring process about understanding like, hey, this is a remote role. What's your experience? Is that going to be a good fit? And kind of just talking through with them, because at the end of the day, you want it to work for both people.
Were you remote from the get-go?
We were, which I think has been very helpful, because it's forced us to be remote first, and it's forced us to put a lot of the systems and processes in place to like be remote. There definitely was a transition probably around like 5 to 7 people where we're like, okay, now we actually have to like formalize a lot of the systems, formalize a lot of the processes, because at certain it's going to be different for each company, but you're going to hit certain like head counts where you're like, okay, I absolutely need like a better process in place, because I'm just overwhelmed with like all these direct reports, all the communications over the place. So just having the systems, having the process, making sure everyone knows those, and just being very like rigorous about making sure they're following has been huge for us.
Do you have any advice or tips beside having processes in place?
So one of the things that also has worked well for us is having um, weekly one-on-ones. So as a team,
Mm-hmm.
and and so I guess taking a step back, we have quarterly OKRs where we kind of set like, hey, these are the high level goals that we're trying to achieve these quarters. This is what those results look like, and what's the metric that we're kind of tracking against. And then we do monthly retrospectives to kind of like, what do we accomplish this month towards that goal? Are there any challenges? What can we do to kind of improve upon the process or the projects? And then we have weekly team one-on-ones. We typically have two of those. So we have one at the beginning of the week, one towards the end. It's like,
Oh, okay.
okay, this is what we're doing for the week. Everyone kind of agrees, biases on the different projects. And then like, this is what did we accomplish at the end of the week? And if we didn't accomplish something, like why? So that serves as a nice stopgap and kind of make sure like everyone's communicating like progress along the way.
Okay, so you got two meetings at the beginning of the week, one with customer success, one with sales, and at the end of the week you got the retrospective, one with sales, one with customer success. That's right.
Yes, and I am not on the end of the week meetings. I'm just in the beginning, and then the respective sort of sales CS manager is handling kind of like the data, like did we get our projects done, and then I'm getting caught back up on the following Monday.
Okay. I'm gonna jump on the OKR mention. How did you guys came about adopting OKR, and did you actually adapted it to the company, or is there anything like different?
So I was sort of pulled into it. I didn't lead the process for the company, but one of our technical team leaders had done it at a previous company, and it was very successful within their product team. And so he was sort of the driving force to get us to start using it. And then basically we're like, all right, team initiative, we're going to use OKRs. And so there's definitely a learning in terms of like, what does that mean? How do you set them up? And over time, we've kind of like in our, when we talk about like the previous quarters OKRs and like what's our plan for next one, we also kind of reflect on like the OKR process and, things, some of the takeaways. It's like, hey, it's got to be like measurable. There has to be something that we can kind of track against. Sometimes that's not easy, but have like a percentage completed, or like have something that at least we can say this is like progress towards that. We try not to make them dependent on another team. So like sales projects or CS projects, everyone within like the sales team or the CS team is responsible for delivering that outcome. In the beginning, we had projects that, especially in CS, that were like, hey, we need to do something, but we need product to actually like contribute, and product has its own OKRs and their own, they're building the software. So we've just gotten a lot smarter about how we set those. And then what we'll do as well is like, we try to set them, obviously before the quarter, but then after that first month, we like revisit them and like, all right, how realistic are these? Do we need to make certain changes? We want to be ambitious, but we also want them to be achievable, and making sure we're making progress towards the right things.
Who's setting the OKR? Do you have like multiple OKR, one for the company, one for the team, one for the individual? How do you actually structure that at the moment?
So we have team OKRs, kind of at a high level. There's, they might be like themes for that quarter if we're trying to like all contribute to something, but it's primarily set at the team level, not the company level. So like the marketing team has their OKRs, the sales team has their OKRs, CS has their OKRs, product has its OKRs, demand gen has its OKRs. So the team largely sets them, and then that gets filtered down into like the individual teams. Like there'll be projects that contribute to those OKRs. At the individual level, we've just started with like individual OKRs. Sometimes that's focused on like the overall team or company OKR, but also sometimes that's just like personal improvement that we're trying to achieve during that particular quarter.
And the person actually set their own OKR?
So they set that with
Their manager?
Their manager. Yeah. So it's like, what at a individual level can you do to, you know, grow as a person, improve like within your role? Is there something that you want to learn? Like, what do you want to get better at? And how can we tie that to sort of a measurable result?
Yeah, talking about measurable results, do you actually, one of the things the OKR is saying is never actually tie the OKR to the actual performance review. But I never really understood how that really can work. Do you guys have it tied to the performance review, or it's not really tied to the performance review? How did you guys work around that?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, we don't necessarily tie it to like a the performance review of like the individual. It's more focused on like what do you want to at that level. It's like what do you want to get better at? Like what can we like as your manager, what skills do you
Hmm.
need? What are there sort of improvements that need to be made? And it's really just around like ongoing learning versus like how do you perform at your job.
Got it. Can you actually tell us a little bit how the performance review is made, or if you have any key learnings here?
Um, we probably aren't the best at that. It's more like there's not really like a formal official like performance review
Hmm.
process. Ours is uh, sort of mostly looking at like what the individual is doing and then just sort of focusing on what we can like improve upon. And some of that is self-driven, some of that is the manager kind of seeing some of those issues. So that does get tied from a like a learning improvement standpoint in their individual OKRs, but we don't really have an official like review process of that.
Okay, that makes sense. Let me switch gear a little bit and let's come back, focus more on your current role and the interest of having, to manage one customer success team and one sales team. What did you find the the biggest? Let's talk again about learnings and key lessons that you had running effectively those double roles.
So, I mean, I guess some of the biggest learnings, and I think we've talked on about these,
Mhm.
but one is just, do the job yourself first and kind of understand like what's in that role. Second, then would be like, okay, what are like the systems and processes that I can put in place to document that, uh, making sure that those have feedback loops so that you can improve, uh, you know, finding the right people. I mean, at the end of the day, it sort of all comes down to the people on the team. So in order to like scale out of an individual contributor and kind of go into a manager and then kind of go more towards like the director, you need the people under you supporting you. Um, and then you need like the systems in place so that you can kind of get a sense at a high level of how things are performing, but also having appropriate feedback loops so you can also get the qualitative feedback from the sort of the bottom up as they make their own suggestions. And so when we come back to the OKRs, when we set the OKRs, each of the team comes with like their suggestions as well. So that's not like a top down initiative. We might have our own ideas, but it's very much a conversation around what do we need to do this quarter to improve. And sometimes there's a theme associated with it, but very much there's feedback from the team itself. Um, Kind of in addition to like finding the right people, a challenge that I've had is like letting go and kind of like firing myself. And there's been that
Any tips for that?
uh, part of it. I think is just like again, if you know you have the right people, have confidence that you can do it, and you don't have to necessarily try to like always manage everything, but then kind of have the check-ins, have the feedback mechanisms in place so that you can make sure that it is actually going in the direction that you think. And then sort of you can step away slowly. So when I was transitioning out of like the customer success role, we had the person who sort of took it on. She was like the first like real good customer success manager. She ran in that role. We hired someone else, and then we hired two other people. And so as I was stepping out, I stopped leading certain meetings, and she led them, and I would attend them, and then she would kind of set the overall direction, and then eventually we like had her managing the one-on-one. So it was a slow roll of responsibilities.
Love it.
We kind of mapped out like, okay, what is all the responsibilities of this particular job? What is all the things I do? What's all the things you currently do? What are the things that I do that you can do? And how do we transition those responsibilities? So I think we did that, you know, largely over a couple of weeks, but then it's probably been, several months now, and I'm still involved, but she runs the day to day, and she's great. So you have to have a process for letting go, but then you just have to do it.
No, I love it because very often people are just giving the whole responsibility and they say, okay, now, sink or swim kind of approach. So I really like that. So you will say, discover all the responsibilities that someone needs to, not necessarily all the skills that someone needs to have in order to step into your shoes, and then train them on some of them that you think is lacking, and having them shadowing you. Is that something like that?
uh, yeah, for certain things, but then it's also like we actually got a spreadsheet and we're like, all right, this is literally everything I do that's customer success or sales related. Like, what are those like tasks and responsibilities? And then it's like, okay, of these things, what can I like pass off? And so we sort of like batched it. And then, that was, like a week or two or however long it is. And then it's like, all right, let's revisit that responsibility sheet. What can I pass off now? Eventually to like, all right, I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing in terms of CS is largely more like strategic and high level and just sort of a general sense of things, but like the actual sort of day-to-day operations, the actual like managing and like producing of the projects or the clients that we're working with is not something that I'm directly overseeing.
Okay, understood. And you started in sales and then build up customer success, or the other way around?
Yeah, so we started so as we sort of started, I was doing both sales and customer success because
From the get-go directly.
Yeah, well, I would sell, and then we're like, okay, oh, now you need help kind of getting up and running. So it was sort of a full end-to-end account management, but that quickly got out of control.
Yeah, it must have been intense.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on, and then I think, in the early days we had some mishires. I think we first hired a sales person to sort of to help me, and then sort of shortly after that, I think we hired it. So yeah, so they were largely done in parallel, but it's like, okay, hey, you made the sale, now you gotta make them successful. So I guess sales came a little bit before, but then CS was shortly after.
And where did you actually find most success in terms of sourcing new candidates? Did you find success in the same channel for both customer success and sales, or did you have like to adapt and get different sourcing?
So I mean, one of the nice things with being remote is our candidate pool is much larger than if you were at a particular location. So we've had a lot of success with what are they? There's the like angel.co for the startups has been a good one for us. And then we kind of start there. And then if we like need to expand the pool, we use a couple of like the remote sites for people, and those have been pretty good. I would say they're about even for sales and customer success.
So both came from Angel Co, and that's how you grew.
Largely, I think for certain hires, if we were like, there's definitely been times where we were looking for a customer success manager and we weren't finding them like good candidates on Angel Co. So I want to say we use like remote.co or something. I don't remember the exact staffing site, but it was like a remote.
We work remotely or some stuff like that.
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember the exact domain.
Got it. Cool. So one thing I'd like to also mention before we wrap it up, what type of books do you read or do you recommend reading in your position that will help someone else?
So I've probably a little lacking on the books. That's kind of an area that I want to
podcast. That could be,
improve upon. Yeah.
Books,
so from a podcast sort of from a podcast standpoint, I mostly listen to things like SaaS related. So it could be OpenView, it could be SaaStr, it could be the SaaS revolution. Those are probably like the top three I consistently listen to.
Awesome. And Mica, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Always happy to connect on on LinkedIn. So I think it's just at Mica Longanecker, and I want to get better at Twitter. So you could also hit me up there at Mica Longanecker
There
as
you go.
well.
If you want to help Mica, just send him a tweet. Got it. And I'll send my invite on LinkedIn just after the talk.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, Mica, thanks so much. It was a pleasure to have
Great.
you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.